Well, good morning to you, folks. Well, it may not be morning when you finally hear it, but at the moment it's definitely morning. So, Michael Crosby, I'm running for president, and I'm the guy that's going to win. There's a lot of people going to sit there and go, what are you talking about? And I says, look, let's look at this here. I just started the communication sequence with the GSA as to what are the processes that we're going to be going through respective to transition. You know, you've got all this neat transition stuff that you can read about if you go onto the web. There's some orgs, and there's the GSA, and there's this little bit of information, and some people will put out a few videos on it. So this is the part where what it basically is we want a smooth transition in government. Really, that's what we want. So that means that people have to prepare. They have to do some preparation. So we have this ideal situation that says, hey, we're just going to train you. We're going to spend 60 days, bring in specialists, train you on how to merge with running the federal government, this massive, huge monster. So this is how it works, basically, you know. So this is the process that is now in the beginning stages. Now, the thing is that for the most part, people actually started stuff back in May. They started choosing their councils and whatnot. But the situation with me was that back in May there was not a lot of people that were believing that I was going to win, and there was still evidence that was en route, returning in, still analyzation going on as to the total depth of how the items were going to work on the legal standpoint, you know. So a lot of this, the transition stuff, the courses, you know, taking all these different courses and going through the early council in May, forming that up and forming your transition team stuff, that did not occur with my campaign because it was not quite the same situation. So that was one of those things here. Now, the interesting thing is people need to understand, welcome to a little bit of American government, is people go, wait a minute, back and made all these numbers, who even knows who's going to be what and what's going on? Well, the idea is you train everybody. And generally, you've got the two big sides. Well, you're going to train both the Republicans and the Democrats, just in case. We're going to train everybody up. You're going to take all those neat little courses, and you have to basically deal with that. So this is the way it works. It's actually it's kind of sad because a bunch of people get trained all up for it. They worked really hard, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, we're so sorry, you weren't the winning side. You know, try again next time, you know. So that's really the reality. Welcome to the reality on that. So the idea is you want to make sure that you have an effective leader that has a team of people ready to make a smooth transition. And of course, with this is 4,000 jobs. There's a lot to go over on that, and how to go over on how the jobs are going to come down, who gets what, you know. So that's basically how it works. That's basically a lot of how it works that way. So, you know, I got that process going. But if I track right back to who's going to win, right? Well, I'm going to win. And there's a reason for that. So we also need to talk a little bit more about how American government works, the historical runnings of it, and how we look at it at a modern standpoint. It's important because some people don't quite understand. They're confused every time there's an election. There's always people that go, wait a minute, I thought it was based upon the popular vote. No. You have the vote, and then you have delegates are chosen based on the vote. Then the delegates go to Washington and go to Congress, and the delegates vote. Guess what? There's more to it than that. Yeah, there's more to it than that. So basically, there's a period that's usually around 3 can be up to 6 weeks, where you have delegates in Washington debating, discussing matters, negotiating. So there's a whole lot of issues that can come about. Now, let me give you a real quick piece of history here. Now, part of the reason that our forefathers structured it that way is because we used to live back in the time of the horse, and you used your feet. So yeah, you would walk places, you would ride places. If any of you ever ridden a horse or just watched people riding a horse, you need to understand that traveling over the course of long distances would take a while. So in order to have the entire concept really work, what you had to send representatives to bring the word and say, yes, here is the certified numbers involving the vote, and here are delegates, the equivalent, whatever the number ratio works out to, of delegates that are here to represent those voters, which, by the way, how delegates get chosen can be different across our history. So that's another interesting area, and there's people that will talk about that, how that works. So in reality, what happens is it's the delegates that vote. Now, historically, delegates sometimes really can get locked into a lot of issues. Another style of politics all by itself, dealing with delegates and negotiation and issues. So guess what? Delegates don't necessarily have to vote the way they were told. How about that? So yeah, really, delegates don't have to vote the way they're told, and there's reasons for this. The reasons for this, if you go back historically, there would be people far removed from the reality of what was actually happening in the world. And the word would take a while to travel around. So when you're in the core of the seat of power in Washington and you're a delegate, you get to find out things that modify situations. No joke about this. You arrive and all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that said, you got to vote for this guy, he's anti-war, and all of a sudden you arrive in Washington and they say, yeah, we're at war. And it's, what? So what? Wait a minute. So all of a sudden you can find out all kinds of other information going, look, I'm confused. Do I spend 3 weeks traveling across the country to basically, go back to the people and say, hey, real quick, what do you guys want to do now that nothing's what it was? It's all changed. So we need to talk about this or have another election or whatever. So then you'd end up having, you could try that, but it didn't actually work out in theory very well. So the delegates are in a situation where they have to figure out what to do, what to vote. Now, into this, let me really make this complicated for you. This process is also the process because it's a buffer zone. It's a buffer zone where anything that needs to be mentioned that could come up can get handled. Like, we've discovered there's election fraud over here. Wow, wait a minute. We have to do an investigation real quick. Somebody comes up with evidence and reason and says, yeah, we found some things out. Guess what? So yeah, that's when the inner corruption factor, the differential between the voters versus the delegates that are chosen, there could be a problem. There can be problems in between there. So that's another thing that can be resolved respective to the negotiating sequence and people who would bring up a reason to put some forth of some kind of extra litigation in Congress that's kind of on the hurry-up notion for the most part. There's also a system of rules and laws that most people don't pay attention to because they usually never come into place. And those could be things like, this particular, you're representing a particular candidate. Oh, guess what? There are some charges and whatnot. And yeah, by the way, there's some other reasons. They were the pirate, this, that, a felon, this, that, the other thing, and they're not qualified. They're not allowed to be a candidate. So, but these things were laid out on the table as reasons throughout law and different stuff of why that might be, kind of sort of generalized. So in the requirements on a lot of this stuff, people are missing that there can be extra arguments that come up at any given time that can modify things. And when that occurs, the area where a lot of that used to occur, the place to have that occur, was before Congress, basically, or before a subcommittee or something like that, in which basically you would have whatever the issue is looked at, and determinations might be able to be made right then and there. But historically, generally, you had people, they wouldn't do certain things. You wouldn't see, mass murder or this or that basically be running for office. They wouldn't do that because they know that they would get disqualified, that they could never make it through congressional scrutiny. Okay, so that having been said, there's a little bit of history for you to have people understand a little bit more that it's the delegates. You've probably noticed on TV the different styles of delegates counts. You got Republican delegates, Democratic delegates, and finalization delegates, basically. The end delegates for the big contests, and there's different numbers involved. This is that confusion over math, how there can be all these delegates and they seem to shrink away. There's a conversion factor over to a different style of delegate, so to speak. So the finalization delegates, when you see the big numbers of the finalization of how many delegates there are, that's the finalization. That's the crew of delegates that go to Washington, not the delegates that are around your state that also might go to Washington. But yeah. So among matters to be resolved, we have a problem. It's called election rigging. If you have a state that's caught election rigging, their delegates are disqualified. This is very important to understand. Delegates can become disqualified. Now, some of you might understand something that you recall in the news, that there are these issues over phony delegates, and you have some very, very serious, criminal prosecutions that are dealing with phony delegates. We're going to talk about that more in a later item, but there's a lot of other people that will talk about that and give you the inform. I want to say tracked forward on my campaign, what's happening with the campaign, and why I'm the guy that's going to win. I'm the guy that's going to win because Julie Sue and Shirley Weber rigged a California election. The recall election in California was rigged. Now, here's why it's important. I was a continuing candidate. I'm a pre-declared continuing candidate, so to speak, prior to all of this. A continuing candidate. In other words, I ran for president for the 2008 sequence. I filed my papers, and I tried to move forward. There's some other problems we're going to get into, and then that deals with Harris and why there's going to be criminal charges coming down on Harris, so to speak. But basically, the election in California, the recall election, was rigged. People go, it was rigged? What happened? I knew it was rigged. Just be quiet, sit down, let me explain this to you. The way the recall election worked was it was a recall for the governor, for Newsom. So basically, in the recall, you have to also select backup candidates. So there was a whole election there. Plus, by the way, there was a whole lot of little measures that went on the ballot. A lot of things, other little things people voted on that, happened. These things happened. So let me explain the confusion a little more. So basically, yeah, you have the recall, and that's just for the governor being recalled. You have the new competing candidates in the event that the recall hits a certain point barrier. In other words, if the governor was recalled, then these other candidates become the valid candidates, basically, for moving forward. Now, into this, basically, you have the other candidates competing, and you had, I don't want to get into the politics of different people saying, no, nobody should run against Gavin and I don't want to go into that. I was a candidate. The problem is I couldn't get posted onto the ballot due to blacklisting by Julie Sue and Shirley Weber. Election rigging. Okay, so the point of what was a rigged election, I'm not going to go into the long shot arguments about how the Gavin percentages could have changed if there was a different style of campaign, yada yada. What I'm going to do is just discuss the section involving the candidates. Now, the thing is that for all anybody knew, you could look at polls, but what happens is what happens when people vote. And the final results are what we deal with for the most part, except for the delegates. No, but the reality that I was blacklisted from being on the ballot because the state of California owed me money. The state of California shut down all of my business interest. All of my multiple separate business nonprofit interests were shut down because of COVID. Now, here's the problem with that. Number one, you're not allowed to do that under any circumstance. It's unconstitutional, period. Modern times, people decided to say, oh, well, we can shut down people's stuff in the interest of safety, is what people are thinking in the new mindset, except that's not constitutional unless you financially compensate the parties completely and give them additional enhancement money to be able to adjust to whatever modifications would have to be made to re-equalize and bring forth a level playing field. Now, the interesting thing is because basically I had 14 running, I believe, but easily 12 RVs, 12 mobile broadcast RV archives that I could activate, bring into the situation, and have on the highways. You put those on the freeway in Los Angeles, you're going to get 1 million people a day seeing those. Yes, some of the same people, it'll be a repeat. But yes, you figure out mathematically that's how many eyes are going to end up seeing that unit and name on unit, so to speak. So that's 1 million people a day. Now, some people could argue and say, well, they were afraid of seeing you running and they rigged the election so that you wouldn't take votes away from people's heads and switch them around with Governor Newsom. We're not going to go there right now. We're not going to go there because, as it's laid out, let's just keep things simple. That's a separate statistical area. The recall portion is separate. The backup, just in case candidates must be there for smooth transition of government. And so that's what we're going to keep looking at. Now, the fact that, yes, 1 million eyes would have seen my units a day would have meant that I would have been on the ballot. That would have meant over 10 million registered voters in California would have seen my name, Michael Crosby, running for governor of California, basically, on the ballot, and they would have seen all of these units running around. Money would have been coming in from donations, and we would have made extra adjustments. So when you have a situation where somebody comes up to your business, comes up to your camp, your business, and they shut it down, that's an act of war. These are things that are in the Constitution and articles. These are acts of war. You can't do that. You cannot attack another candidate's camp, or it disqualifies the other candidate. It disqualifies the shared candidate. So is Newsom disqualified? Okay, look, let's just keep this simple for the moment. Let's not go into this a whole lot at the moment. I mean, all these different technicalities. I'm trying to focus on some stuff that's really, really important. And I know people got a lot of different thoughts, but please just be patient. We're in a little bit in the future, and I'm just trying to use some of the information of our recent past to bring us up to date of what we need to understand legally for what happened. Okay, so the focus is on the here, the now, the forward, and it's important for people to understand. Now, there's analysis. You can put things and factors in computers and say, okay, you had this many RVs. Oh, here's your policies. We can compare policies and popularities and figure out how people would have felt, come up with some statistical averages that kind of sort of turn into numbers that make some kind of sense. And basically, statistically, when you do go through and do all this stuff, I was coming up basically with 45% of the vote. In fact, I was emerging as the number one candidate next to the other Democratic and Republican candidates. So this is very important, because what's important about this is that would have meant that basically I would have had over 10 million California voters. I would have been, the results would have been put all over the media. I would have been known by major media organizations as somebody who would have been going into what? A runoff, basically, a runoff. But I'm not sure exactly how they wrote that. It might have been written that I would have became governor in the event that the recall numbers on the vote went that way. However, what's important is even if it went into a runoff, I was the higher of the two candidates, statistically, on the estimates. So I would have been the higher of the two candidates going into the runoff election. Either way, what's important is I would have been on the ballot, and more than 10 million voters in California would have heard of me. I had at the time I was going for 200 websites for various issues. I was trying to basically break issues down and put them on many websites on different servers so people could access them separately and it would go faster. This was more of an advanced design to be able to allow the web to work smoother. That was the idea there. I do know a little bit about computers that way. Actually, I know quite a bit about computers, and I believe around 10,000 computers I gave away either for free, a few of them, and mostly just sold them regardless of loss, getting batches of equipment to get equipment for the nonprofit, which was part of the main function. But I actually enjoyed it, so I'd fix all these computers and just sell them. It's really nice to see people's face light up, when you got one or two parents and they're going to buy a computer and they're going to pay 30, 50, 60 bucks, maybe 80 bucks for a computer, and they're getting it for a half price or 25 cents on the dollar for what it would normally cost, and their kids are almost crying. You're changing their life. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing, I'm telling you. But let me move on here. Okay, tracking back here. So the reality is that somebody broke the rules. Somebody cheated. Okay, it's an act of war. You got to read the Constitution, the articles. It's an act of war. You cannot attack another candidate. You cannot go attack their housing, their vehicles, their wagons, their archives, their income. You cannot attack their business. Okay, these are deemed acts of war, and that would disqualify parties from basically at some level for running. So musters, if your musters, your supporters, other people do things, or parties in your employ or under your charge do things, then you're disqualified from basically being able to run and be a candidate anymore. You're over, you're done. You're not just done, you're permanently done. It's the end. It's called you're over with. Goodbye. Now, what else you have to deal with this stuff is various other factors. At what levels did things occur? This is how bad it got. Artifacts older than the Constitution of the United States have been lost. Okay, the Constitution has separate protections for archives and all this stuff. Archival law, it's very, very important. Can get a little complicated if some people are trying to understand it, but usually it's not that hard to understand the various levels of archive book. I mean, you got something from the archive, it's like the library, right? You pulled a book out and you didn't take it back. Okay, so, you're going to steal the archive books. You can't do that. Okay, those are classified. Okay, no. But really, moving forward, so literally the Constitution has areas specific that are quite specific to the protection of archives. It's considered the ultimate no-no. You do not attack an archive. You attack an archive, death penalty. Death penalty. You cause the destruction of artifacts, death penalty. Our forefathers were very big on, we have to protect the books. Books must be protected at all cost. Archives must be protected at all cost, regardless of where they are. And artifacts, these items must be protected. No slack here. No slack here, We have to have an orderly government. Yeah, you come in and you're going to destroy books and artifacts, death penalty. We're not even going to play with you. Okay? This is a different type. This is to keep people from these little ideas about having their little rioting possibly or insurrection, rebellion, whatever, to understand that when you do certain things, it's a whole extension. The charges are way worse. This is very, very important because what has happened is I'm also an archiver, which means an archive has been affected negatively. It's been virtually wiped out. So the law says that parties wrapped up into this are disqualified. So what we end up having here is we have Julie Sue Kamala Harris. Julie Sue blacklisting people. People already understand that, $31 billion in fraud discovered. Yeah, and you had all these people you could never get through on the phones, and you had these people with the super robo-dialers, all this other stuff. Okay, and then you have all these different lawsuits of people that were supposed to get money that didn't, that sued and finally got it. And not everybody's been compensated yet. Hello, how you doing? I'm one of those people. So basically, blacklisting the income of a candidate is an act of war. Blacklisting the income of an archiver is an act of treason punishable by death. That's what Julie Sue is looking at as among the major charges that she's going to be facing this way that are in processing right now. I have to disclose to the public what's going on, what the reality is, and what the outcomes can possibly be. Now, it's also important to understand that you have Shirley Weber, who didn't do anything. We have the Secretary of State's office, again, didn't do anything. So with the Secretary of State's office, we have a situation that involved basically Shirley Weber refusing to take action, refusing to verify, little facts of evidence like, oh yeah, this guy does petitions from time to time, every so often, multiple elections, and he basically witnesses the fact that certain people signed the petition, then he signs the bottom. He's the big witness. Okay, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that verifies that I'm a participant in the process of elections. Number one, at that level. The candidate levels is a different level, but that goes in different territory. So basically, the evidence that proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that the shutdown of how they affected the gathering and people to be able to gather signatures and all that was negatively affected, and I was due compensation by Congress just for the labor of that. Okay, this is aside from the other 14 other types of different seasonal occurrences of items that are part of the nonprofit activity of the archive. So, this is crucially important. So, in understanding this, she's a participant in blacklisting. She's in dereliction of duty. She's screwed up. She didn't just screw up. Well, there has to be a deep investigation over this. But we have basic cogs that couldn't occur. So it's me calling up saying, yeah, you guys owe me like, I think it ended up finally getting to 90 grand, over 90 grand, I think it was. But, you go along, yeah, I'm owed 30 grand, 60 grand, all this money. Yeah, by the way, I need that money to post the candidate fees, the $6,000 to basically get on the ballot as the governor. And I want to be credited because the state owes me money. So we not only have the attack charges, we also have the fact that the state owed me money and was shirking their responsibility. That's a separate charge area, by the way. It's kind of interesting how law works. So it's a no-brainer. The state of California owes you money. The Secretary of State says, type, call, and in 5 minutes she would know, yes, obviously this guy would be owed money and you haven't been paid. Wait a minute, we're discovering the possibility of wrongdoing by Julie Sue. So instead of her saying, yes, we'll credit your account immediately, sir, and get that ballot fee covered and get you posted onto the ballot, as well as your cost for whatever you want to write to put on the ballot, those charges, she ignored me. She did nothing. And the people in the office says, well, we don't know what to do. Constantly, we're not sure what to do with any of this. We're not sure what to do. BS. Okay, this is called blacklisting a candidate. This is what you call rigging an election. Rigging an election. That's a rigged election. So at this point, we have very serious charges across a wide array of areas of what has happened, transpiring to a candidate that has been ongoing as a presidential candidate since 2005. And there's proof of this because I've got previous information still in existence on the web from these other cycles. So this is very important to understand because right now we have one more deal. Remember I said musters of musters. Musters, co-workers, by the way, also connect. Those are your buddies. That's your club. You can't be connected. This is a conflict. People go, oh, it's just a conflict of interest. Read the Constitution and the Articles and understand the compressed document, how you unfold it and how this looks. You've got an area where people are facing death penalty charges. Death penalty charges. No joke. Because why? Remember, archives, artifacts. So into this, we've got a bunch of people that are going to prison. And as it turns out, the AG of California is also involved. The AG's office refused to do their job. They went in dereliction of duty. And they have a certain type of policy that has been ongoing. Well, as it turns out, it was not the first time that this policy would be affecting a campaign. I was attacked by police officers. Arkansas in California. Arkansas investigated the charges and said these are erroneous. This is all ridiculous. So these repeated attacks upon me, a presidential candidate, these were serious felonies. And the AG at the time in the past was Kamala Harris. So you see, Kamala Harris refused to cooperate. She refused to prosecute the parties. She aided and abetted them to stay at large and be an ongoing threat against me, a presidential candidate. And also we have archiver. You just add archiver into that, yes, because the officers were attacking an archive. Those are federal charges, by the way. So we have overlapping charges again and again of matching charges of why Harris did bad things. Harris becomes the ultimate defense item. She's the one that would be blocking extradition to Arkansas for Arkansas to prosecute. Arkansas says, yeah, no problem. We'll prosecute these people. They've committed crimes. So that's the short version of the explanation for you people that want to understand why I'm going to win. I'm going to win because Kamala Harris is an illegal candidate. She's facing charges that include the death penalty. Kamala Harris isn't going anyplace. It is impossible for Kamala Harris to make it past my complaints when she gets up to Congress. Those delegates will be disqualified out of California because California is involved in election rigging. This matter must be resolved. It must be resolved. So basically at this point, what's getting ready to happen is, this is reality. Let me explain reality, people. Reality is, look at the news, watch the news. Trump's going to go to prison. I'm coming up with these charges. Kamala Harris is going to end up going to jail. She's disqualified. California's been busted red-handed rigging elections, which leaves me as a competing candidate for the Democratic ticket. There's lodged protests from the very beginning and could see the structure of how all of this works. I could see the structure of various parties involved doing various things that would be wrong, that would be affecting negatively elections. That's why there's a sheet on the web that goes through 29 to be named later Rico parties. All this also deals with multiple entities, so it's a Rico. It's a Rico situation and an overlap understanding as well. So this is something that's very, very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Crosby, and I am going to become the next president of the United States. I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to take a morning break, and I will be coming back with more information. A quick note, why not vote for the guy who's going to win?